Yeah, g'day YouTubers. Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. I came into possession of this old Stihl handbook, Stihl Chains and Bars. It was given to me by a guy called Stoney here in Victoria. And it's dated 1990. So 34 years. And it's interesting looking of the 10 degrees downward tilt because they recommended it back then. And the only thing that I can see is the actual tooth geometry looks slightly different in the pictures. But it doesn't go into a huge detail, so we'll just sort of go over a few points, a few things that I've got marked. But if you look at the shape of the tooth, it looks like the Cox chipper chain. Now, I've got something marked on this page. Yeah, look, if you have a look at that, we'll see if we can zoom in there. It really does look like the Cox chipper chain. So the profile looks a little bit different than it used to on the tooth. This is going back 34 years ago. So, and we'll just go up to the next one I got marked. This one here. So what do we got here? I've got something marked here. Yeah, look, this is something that was interesting that I found out. So this is from Stihl, and they're saying, I'll see whether you can read this, there are different file holders to match the various types of pitches of chain. Each file holder has reference line showing the correct filing angle. The file seat in the file holder also determines the position of the file against the tooth. This means that the correct file and holder ensure that the file protrudes 1/10 of the diameter above the plate. So they're saying that when you use, and I've got one here, the old file holder, which is this type of thing here, that the file only protrudes 10% above. Like I always thought it was around 20%. Maybe it is now, but back then it was definitely 10%. And that's written here in the Stihl, in the booklet. So that's something that was interesting. Now, another thing that caught my attention, there's a few things, is that when we go here, we'll see if we can zoom in there too. We'll just sort of get this in the right spot here. I want to draw your attention to the different file diameters. And we start off at 3.5. And even if we went up to a 1/2 inch chain, they list a 1/2 inch using 6.3. But you'll notice you've got 3.5 millimeter file for a 1/8 chain or 1/4 inch. 0.325 is 4.8 millimeter file, and also they list a 4 millimeter file there as well for 0.325. So I'm not too sure. Oh, there you go. There it is. So here's another one. Let's see whether you can see this, called Topic Super. I've heard of Rapid Micro, Rapid Super, but not Topic Super. Whatever Topic Super is, 4 millimeter file. And then if we go to Rapid Standard, which is, what we use, Rapid Micro, Rapid Super, Tonic Super. As I said, Tonic Super, I'm thinking this must be low profile or something, but you see how you got 5.5 millimeter files? There's no reference to a 5.2 millimeter file, which is what they use these days. I'm sort of thinking that the teeth were slightly different profile back in those days. Yeah, no 5.2 millimeter file there, so that was interesting. Now, another interesting thing, and we talk about the 10 degrees downward tilt. So this is a 10 degrees downward tilt here, and they're recommending to use the file holder, these file holders, 10 degrees downward tilt. So they're recommending that. Now, these days, they don't recommend tilting that. So what's interesting the 10 degrees downward tilt is for rapid micro, rapid super, and topic super. The top position, where it doesn't have tilt, is for rapid, standard, and pico. So that's their recommendation. Just see whether you can zoom in. See the top one, file position for rapid, standard, and pico. The bottom position, rapid micro, rapid super, and topic super. There's a 10 degrees downward tilt. So yeah, look, we'll just, that's interesting, that. So it's interesting when you look at this. This is great reading because this was, you know, over 34 years ago. There's bits of information on the Stihl USG grinder. Look, they look a lot different now than that. That's what they used to look like. Just a picture of yesterday. There's yesterday's USG grinder. The capacitor, look, the switch box is different. It's all different. Anyway, yeah. So, yeah, I think there was only one other thing that caught my attention. Yeah, look, it's interesting when you look at the teeth here. This is why I was talking about the profile looks different. Like, especially when you look over here, it really does look like the old Cox chipper chain. This profile looks totally different than today's profile. Talks all about information about the tang and the condition and where the oil should go. So there's a lot of information about the tooth, not a lot about the geometry. But yeah, look, I just wanted to draw your attention to the 10 degrees downward tilt, how Stihl recommended it and how they recommend it in this little book. But they don't sort of go into any great detail about the 10 degrees downward tilt. But as you could see, they recommended it, and these days they don't. There was one other. Yeah, there was another one I wanted to show you, and that was, I'll see if I can find it. It was the raker gauge. I'll just sort of go through the book. The raker gauge back in the day almost looks identical, but the raker gauge of today, here's a little bit of information about straightening your bar with a hammer. There was another one I wanted to bring to your attention, and you will see they've only got 4 rivets in the nose. And if we zoom in there, you can see the 4 rivets there, and they look like they're little bearings in there. I don't know if they're ball bearings or roller bearings or what they are, but you can see that the rivets only do one thing. Yeah, it's just 4 rivets, whereas today they have more. I was just trying to find the raker gauge. There it is, the raker gauge. Have a look at that. So here it is here. And the difference is the part at the back hasn't changed. The windows, there's more windows. There's only, if you have a look at the difference, there's a little bit of difference there. Just a little bit. But on top, you got 30 degrees, 10 degrees, and 35. So there's no 10 degrees stamped on there. Now, another thing I'd like to draw your attention to, if you look in the top left-hand corner, you'll notice it's a full chisel tooth. And I'll put a few photographs up of this full chisel tooth that was sent to me by somebody. And they didn't confirm how old the chain was, because I don't think they knew either. But they were talking about the 10 degrees downward tilt. And if you clearly look at this picture, you can see that the tooth is not sitting horizontal. It certainly, now I know that, you know, different, you can take, I've taken a photo very similar in this position, and it doesn't look like that tooth. This tooth definitely looks like it's down on an angle. And if that's down on an angle, and this chain's over 30 years old, stands to reason why they had the 10 degrees downward tilt and they no longer use it these days. Because I could tell you what, that if you look at the modern tooth and I put a square on it, it's dead flat. The top plate is horizontal. It's 90 degrees to the chain bar. So it doesn't go on an angle. But these teeth definitely look like they're on an angle. So if someone out there has an old chain that's over 30 years old from the 90s, they may be able to confirm that it is. But what I will do, and I'll show you the picture, I'll take a picture of this tooth that we've got here, this one that I made, at the same angle of the tooth that looked like it was sloping down. So if I could take the same camera angle and we can look at that and compare the two photographs, and I think you'll find out that that old tooth, maybe that's the way it was back in those days. Because I definitely heard someone said that the geometry was changed about 30 years ago, because they were telling me that they had an MS 660 and they remember reading in the manual about using the 10 degrees downward tilt, and they said somewhere in the mid-90s it changed. So somebody may be able to enlighten me whether that is the case, that the full chisel chains had a slight downward angle on them, and that would make perfectly good sense as to why they recommended the 10 degrees downward tilt. Still no longer recommend it. Now, I know some of the Oregon chains out there. I don't have any of those Oregon chains that recommend 10 degrees downward tilt. Again, if somebody's got one, they could tell me whether they think that they're 90 degrees or whether on a slight angle. And that would make perfect sense to me. Okay, so what we're going to do now, top left-hand corner, there's a picture of that tooth that looks like the top sloping down on an angle. So you can see that quite clearly. I've taken a picture of the tooth that I made, the stainless steel one, and I made it so that the top plate is sitting 90 degrees to the bar. So we'll put that one up next. If you have a look at it, I think if you clearly see that, especially if you look underneath the tooth, the first picture of that old tooth definitely looks like it's definitely on a slight angle. The camera held makes it look like the tooth is probably sloping more than it should be, but I definitely think there is a slight slope on that tooth. Anyway, it'd be interesting to see what people write in the comments as to whether you think that that tooth slopes down or it's the angle of the camera. Anyway, very interesting about the 10 degrees downward tilt, because there's a lot of people and ah, whether they are going to use it, whether they're not. They've been using it for years. And if people have been hand filing and using 10 degrees downward tilt for many, many years and had great success with it, they're probably very reluctant to change. But that said, I don't think putting a bit of tilt on your tooth is going to cause any harm whatsoever. Anyway, I'll be very interested what people have to say about that.